Good evening, everybody. This is Patrick Milliken from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and we're here with another of our virtual events, and really excited, always excited to see our good friend T Jefferson Parker, aka Jeff Parker, here to discuss his really wonderful new book, 1,000 Steps. And Barbara and I'm going to stay on this one because Barbara and I both love the book so much. We're gonna interrogate Jeff about it and all the details and things. But welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. It's nice
Great
to be here. Thanks
you.
for the invite.
Yeah. Oh, and Jeff also signed, as always, kindly, a whole batch of books for us, and we just got them. And we were also talking about this wonderful Age of Aquarius style psychedelic cover. They really outdid themselves, didn't they, Jeff?
Yeah, I love it. The cover really struck me right off, and I was real happy with it. And I get a lot of comments on that cover, and people are liking it. Today, I think it was Crime Reads, the blog, crime thing online, was talking about 10 new books of that you should read for so far into January 2022, and they chose my cover because it's so cool looking. I'm sure it's just like you can't take your eyes off it. Anyway, I like it a lot. Yeah.
I do too. I think the colors are wonderful. I sort of dressed smash it, notice that, which I love. And I'm so glad that you have signed copies for us, because we've been doing this together with signed books, Lord, for at least 20 years now.
We have, but we go back 20 years anyway. Yeah.
All the way back to the Snake book. That was the first time you came to the Poison Pen.
And
talk about covers. Do you remember the cover for that book?
I do. Yeah. That was a good cover.
It was, but it was creepy.
Yeah, the scale, the scales that were embossed and stuff.
Yeah.
That was a very creepy cover.
It was. Well, Jeff is a 3-time Edgar winner. I think are you the only 3-time Edgar winner? I think you are.
No, I don't think so, Barbara. I think if I remember right, Dick Francis has won 3 Edgars for best novel, best mystery, and I've won 2. And I've won another at Edgar, but for short story. So as far as slugging percentage, Dick Francis is up there, and I think James Lee Burke is maybe up there also. So don't quote me on either of those, but I'm a close second or third, I think.
Well, whatever it is, it's remarkable to win 1 Edgar, let alone 3.
I know. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, but I think it's particularly cool that one of them is not for a novel, but rather for a short story, because, not every novelist is skillful at short stories and vice versa. So yay for you.
That's true. That's true. I enjoy writing short stories. I write more now than I used to. I don't think I wrote a short story until I'd written 15 novels or 10 maybe. And I've got a nice little batch of them together now. I've got 12 or 15 short stories and another one coming out this year. And I've really had fun. Really had fun with those. I look forward to them. When you send in a manuscript to your publisher and your agent, it's weeks before you get notes on them generally. And so what are you going to do? I can only sit around and in my office and clean things up and do home improvement for so many days, and then I want to write something. So I have a list of little short stories I want to get to someday.
Well, that's very exciting. So writing is a compulsion, right? You could be a drunk, or you could be a writer, or you could be both, but it's just a writer. So this book has been described as a coming of age thriller. And I'd like to say that Jeff's roots in his previous books for that are really wonderful. Silent Joe was an absolutely terrific and in part coming of age novel. That was his first Edgar. And California Girl, which was his second Edgar, was a deep look at life in Southern California. So to a great degree, Jeff, I think of you as as kind of a chronicler of Southern California. You've written so many books where Southern California is the landscape. But this one, you go all the way back to 1968 when you were 14, in which I was 30. So your experience of 1968 and mine are completely different. I don't think Patrick were you even around then?
I arrived the following year.
Right.
I was an Altamont baby.
Is that right? You were 1960, your birth year was
October of 69. Yeah.
No kidding, Patrick. Wow, that's great. Wow.
So for Patrick, this is revelatory history. And for me, this is like, oh my God, that was what was going on in California, where I was in Oak Ridge, Tennessee with 2 babies and totally missing the entire Timothy experience.
Different worlds, no kidding.
But it is, Jeff. And one of the things, and you're experiencing it too, one of the things that's really weird, as you grow older, you realize that your life is in fact turns into history. And the longer you live, the more your life becomes history and your memories of it. So you had to draw back to when you were 14, basically, in order to write the story. So what inspired you to do that?
Well, when I was 14, I discovered Laguna Beach. It was 1968. I lived just over the hill in a little town called Tustin, but I spent a lot of my summers and hours and weeks and stuff, especially summers, in Laguna with my buddies. And for the first time in 1968, we started hanging out there. We would get our moms and dads to drive us to Laguna Beach over the hill from Tustin because we were too young to drive. And they'd drop us off and we'd body surf and go to Taco Bell and go to the Sound Spectrum and, browse the records and just sort of hang out in Laguna for the day. And to a curious 14-year-old, Laguna Beach in 1968 was just this magnificent kaleidoscope of images and people and nature and politics. And I can remember those times so clearly, what Laguna Beach was like to my innocent 14-year-old's eyes. And I stored that info and those moments and those hours away as only a young person can. I was an open book and experiencing all these strange new things. And I had good senses back then, as any 14-year-old does, but I had no real life experience. I had no way to put these things in perspective. So I was kind of, slack-jawed at the hippies and the clothes and the gorgeous rough coastline of Laguna and the artists and the galleries and the cops chasing the hippies around and the thick smell of marijuana everywhere you went and the deals going down to Taco Bell and just all of that to a 14-year-old was just kind of astonishing. And so I kept that in my brain and I'd never really dwelled on it or thought about it or anything like that for 50 years later. I came, like I was explaining before the show, it's time to write another book. And I started thinking about those times and I started kind of letting my mind wander back. And I was surprised to see how rich and thick and detailed and accurate those memories still are, that I was accumulating back then. And so when I started enjoying that year of 1968 in the past, through my own history, I just got more and more revved up about the idea of setting a book there. And that's half of it. And the other half of it is that 1968, no matter where you were in America, was a very, very intense and pivotal year. That was one of our most important years. And I think that I wanted to write about it because of that. We had so much going on in this country and so much strife and so many beautiful things and so many truly horrible things going on. It was a great year for a writer to write about, and so all of that just kind of forced me to write this book, and so I did.
Well, you had to come up with a plan, but let's talk for a moment about the music. This is where Patrick is going to be so
the music.
Patrick is
Cool.
like a music scholar. But I read somewhere, Jeff, that the music that you hear as a teenager, a young teenager, is the music that stays with you all your life. And that's really been true for me. I can still sing Chubby Checkers where I'm completely lost in any modern music. And so, you mentioned things like Cream and Hendrix, Dylan, Aretha, Buffalo Springfield, Janis Joplin, the Beatles, and the Stones. And we just have been watching, Get Back, the Beatles, or Let It Be, the Beatles thing, which honestly, it's a lot of hours for a fairly small concert reward at the end, but nonetheless, it takes you back looking at the clothes, because didn't they do that concert right about the time you're writing about?
Yeah,
I think they did.
Yeah.
Isn't it
You're talking about the
68 or 69
rooftop
or last?
Apple. Yeah, I don't know, Patrick, you're the scholar. Was that 68? I
think it might have been 69.
It was later. It wasn't 68.
Yeah.
Not much later.
They broke
Not
up
much.
in
No, it was very
70.
close to that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Patrick, talk to us about some of these groups, because you probably know their music.
Well, yeah, sure. What a soundtrack to an era. It's amazing to think about. And it's just such a part of those years and the popular music that was coming out, between 67 and 68, 69. It really reflects the tidal shift that's going on in the country. And that's one of the themes that I wanted to kind of ask you about with the book is you mentioned that this was a real transitional year. And of course it is, I mean, the year before is the summer of love,
Mhm.
and throughout the book, we see, the hippie movement and, this idea of expansion, expanding the mind and consciousness and LSD and, this sort of utopian view
Yeah.
of society. And then, of course, it's not very long where it all kind of fades into 1970s burnout and, failed dreams and heroin addiction and all that stuff.
Well said. Well noted. Yeah.
Yeah, and all those things are kind of at play in this book. And our focal point, as you said, is this amazing character, the 16-year-old, I think he's 16, right, in the book,
Mhm.
Matt
Mhm.
Anthony. Can you just kind of, you mentioned, you were 14 and just how autobiographical it is the book. Are there, his older brother Kyle is in Vietnam and he's a short timer. He only has a certain amount of time before he comes home. His father's gone,
Mhm.
and mom, is one of these kind of, hippie moms that's sort of struggling, and not terribly reliable. And he's forced to be the grown up in a lot of ways. And then his sister, setting the plot, the sister is disappeared. Sorry, I just set up the entire book for you, but
Sounds good.
it's such a great cast of characters. Tell us a little bit about that core group of people.
Yeah, sure, Patrick. I wanted to write a coming of age story, thriller, if you will. It's kind of contradictory, but I thought both could be done well. It's been done well before, and I just thought it would be really, really interesting to write a story about a 16-year-old who is just about to get his driver's license and is literally growing in the book. He changes from he comes of age in a real noticeable physical way. He's getting growing pains. He's getting big. He's outgrowing his clothes. He's kind of clunky. He opens the book as kind of an innocent, and 350 pages later, I think Matt is well on his way to becoming a cognizant, capable adult. So he's making a huge move at 16 that we all do, whether it's 2 years or 5 years or whatever. He's on his way to being a man, I think. And yeah, there's a lot of autobiography in there, but it's disguised and it's exaggerated and it's augmented. For instance, people have asked me that, about that time and all the detail that's in the book and the immersive kind of feel that you have when you read it. The prices of things and the culture and the music and the TV and the copper tone banner being flown across the beach and by the little biplane and all that kind of detailed stuff. And they say, well, Parker, you must have really, how'd you do your research for the book? And the answer is I didn't do any. I was there. I watched it and I pulled from memory and I exaggerated as all fiction writers do. And I plucked the things that I thought I would need for the book. And so, this cast of characters, it's a real family tale. I always write family tales. I'm into families and moms and dads and brothers and sisters and stuff. And it was real easy to write this. I used to live in a cold, drafty little clapboard apartment that is the apartment version of the house where Matt lives with his mom and his sister who's missing. And so that was such a tactile time for me. I can remember the smell of the eucalyptus on that street and the nightshade vines that grew outside in this cold little place where I lived. And it was so easy to turn that into Matt Anthony's house, And I named Matt after Matt Anthony, after my own brother, Matt Parker, who's a terrific artist. And Matt Anthony is on his way to being an artist. And Matt's a fisherman. My brother Matt is a surfer. So I pulled a lot of details, personal stuff there in some way, shape, or form, not directly but indirectly. I've done a lot of the things that happen in the book. So it was almost like remembering. I never for instance, I never sat in a tree behind the Pageant of the Masters amphitheater, although I know it was done. My friends did it. And but so when it was time to write that in the book, you know, I had been to the Pageant of the Masters and sat back in the nosebleed seat so many times as a youngster. It was like second nature to describe what it must have been like for Matt to watch his inamorata perform in this tableau vivant. It was fun. Well, I'll tell you, this was a fun book to write. I had a blast. It came out faster and with less premeditation than almost all my books. I wrote it in the first draft in 6 months instead of 9, which is really fast for me. And instead of running, you know, 500 pages, it was like 750 pages. It was just a gigantic thing. I'd never written anything nearly that long. And so I took 200 pages out in the edits, you know, and in the rewrites.
Really?
But there was, I wanted to give myself over to the joy and the exuberance of my feelings about that time and about those memories. And interestingly, but not surprisingly, I also wanted to immerse myself in an alternative reality to 2020 COVID lockdowns. And so I fled directly to 1968. And I used to think that it was pejorative to write about you know, escapist fiction. I always thought that was for lightweights. Well, I don't believe that anymore because that's what I did. I escaped into my memories and my past, and I think that was a pivotal year. And it 68 has a lot of parallels with 2020, 2021. So I think that there's a reason for a logical, you know, historical reason to write that book, as well as just being an escape to a past that was for me kind of bewildering and idyllic and very strange and psychedelic.
I think you're absolutely right about the divisions in the country were so strong in 1958, you know, riots in Chicago and all the rest of it. So you're right, there are parallels. One of the things I most enjoyed, because I recall that getting a driver's license at 16 was like the be all and end all of every teenager, because basically it was your ticket to freedom. It meant that you had wheels. In my high school, actually, it was a class that we all took, you know, driver's ed. We all took it as part of our high school curriculum. And they had, you know, I remember taking the test in the high school parking lot, and, you know, the whatever version of the DMV came, you know, to the high school. And I mean, this is a suburb of Chicago, but, you know, and I mean, we could all hardly wait. But the horror of it for me was because I had been skipped upgrades. I was a senior, where my friends were sophomores. So I spent almost 2 years a prisoner, you know, of not having a driver's license while everybody else was doing it. And I had to cage rides, or you know, I mean, you couldn't invite your parent to pick you up, right? I mean, that would have been just like the worst. So, you know, I think you captured that with Matt, you know, because there he is, you know, not yet with his license, but, and I don't know that today there's that same sense of incredible freedom and the world is open up to you once you get your driver's license.
Well, I think you're right. I know a lot of young people through my sons who were kind of really blasé about getting, I'll get it next year. I mean, it wasn't urgent for them at all. They would Uber or their friends would drive. And yeah, I saw kind of like a whole generation kind of thinking, driving's a hassle. Yeah, but for me, you know, 1968 or well, it would have been 1970 when I got my driver's license, I guess. It was a ticket. It was a ticket to freedom, and it was wonderful. And God bless my mom and dad for allowing me, you know, this skinny buck-tooth 16-year-old kid with a driver's license to use the family van. You know, it was like, wow, thanks, guys.
Well, it's a different time, and I think I don't think it's such a big thing anymore, but it surely was then. But you know, back then, before the internet and whatever, we were really circumscribed by the place that we were. You could either ride your bike, or you could walk, or you know, or you could drive, but you didn't have an opportunity to communicate or do all the things that kids can do now just with a computer. The world was just a completely different place. It was fun to write about 16-year-old Matt Anthony as an amateur sleuth, if you will, looking for his sister, with so few real
tools at his disposal. You know, you got phones, but they're at home and they're on a long kinky cord, and you know they're a hassle. And there's phone booths, but that's no good. You know, he can't drive. He's got a bike, but Laguna Beach is a really hilly, vertiginous kind of place for anybody on a bike. You know, that's a tough sledding there. So he's got that. You know, he can go from place to place and ask questions, and he can show the drawings and the sketches that he's done of his sister to people and ask if they've seen her. But he can't really avail himself of anything, you know, technological at all. So it was fun to go back in time to what the frustrations must have been for you know, any person looking to find someone with so few tools at their disposal.
That was one of the things that I loved most about the book, Jeff, because I mean, today's teenager, you know, would flip out their phone and take pictures,
Yeah.
you know, whereas he's at the beginning of the book, you know, and also having his paper route, you know, he knows where everybody lives in the community.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's interacting with some of them. You know, he knows a lot of stuff about his environment. And, you know, I just love the fact that he's interpreting everything he sees through his sketches. And, you know, it's almost like there are certain scenes in the book where he can't sketch fast enough. You know, he's just looking and sketching. And just, I thought that was really, really well done.
I had fun writing those scenes. And again, Matt Anthony I drew a lot of that from my brother, Matt Parker, he's younger than me. And I watched him develop as, you know, as a young, well, just a kid to start with, who was interested in drawing and had a knack for it, and, you know, an interest in it and stuff, and watched him through his life, and, you know, up into high school and college, and his years as a painter and beyond. So I had a nice model for Matt Anthony. It was my brother, and I remember the frustrations and the impatience that my brother Matt would have when the drawing wasn't going the way that he wanted to, or the painting wasn't going the way that he wanted to. And I learned from him how, you know, just how difficult it is to do that, you know, especially a painting. I mean, a kid with a knack for drawing is one thing, but trying to make a 4x6 oil on canvas, have fun, you know, and I've watched my brother struggle that way. And so I tried to give Matt that same kind of passion and frustration at the same time, because some of his drawings turn out good, some of them turn out well, and some are a disaster, and he gets all emotional about it.
It's funny because he had, at least when I was reading him, a little bit of Huck Finn in him, a little bit of Little Rascals. You know, I mean, the poor kid's starving throughout the entire book. You know, he can't get
He's
food.
hungry all the time.
Yeah, he's just grabbing table scraps, and you know, because his mom is kind of checked out. I don't know. It was pretty amazing. And of course, can you talk a little bit about the community itself? I mean, I get the sense from reading it that it was kind of a mellow, sort of small town almost environment. And you know, up north, of course, the previous year was the Summer of Love in San Francisco, and set the scene for us of how that's trickling down to Laguna. You know, there's this whole vibe about the cops, you know, these dirty hippies coming down and corrupting our youth, and the John Birch Society, and set the scene a little bit for us.
Yeah, that's very true. The Summer of Love was 1967, and when that kind of burned out, the hippies up there, the young people up there, just kind of headed south. They just went to Laguna, and Laguna became the next kind of 68 became the next, you know, Summer of Love Part 2, just because it was accessible and beautiful and known as a tolerant place and all. The rub there for the young people, and as well as for the people, the citizens of Laguna, is that most of the citizens of Laguna then were pretty conservative people. You know, that's Laguna's Laguna, but it's still Orange County, and the rule of law is conservative there, and it was even then, even in an artist community which was tolerant of different, you know, kinds of people and what have you. It was conservative, and the John Birch Society was, you know, extant. The police were ferociously dedicated to keeping drugs out of away from, young people. There's a character in the book, Bill Furlong. He's a big burly sergeant and he loves arresting hippies, and he'll round them up 8 or 10 at a time and throw them into this giant van called
Moby Cop.
Moby Cop, the locals call it. And Laguna still has those vans. I have a neat picture of one. I should send it to you. And so anyway, and yet, behind all of Bill Furlong's disdain and disgust for the young people and the drugs that they're using, he firmly believes that drugs aren't bad for young people, and that marijuana is a gateway drug. And if you start with marijuana, you're going to be getting into pills and your powders and needles and everything else before you know it. So that was kind of the mentality in Laguna Beach. Very, very free, very hippie, very free love. All that good stuff. Plenty of marches against the war and stuff. But the conservatives ran the town, and the cops were conservatives, and so you had a natural, just a butting of heads right there.
But then you got this character, Bridget Darnell. Tell us a little bit about her.
Bridget Darnell, like a lot of the characters in the book, I named Bridget Darnell after a friend of mine, Peggy Darnell. That's neither here nor there. But Bridget Darnell is a young Laguna Beach police officer, one of the early women in uniform, 1968. That wasn't very common, and none of the cops on the Laguna Beach force in this book really lend much credence to the idea that Patrick's sister has disappeared. She's only been gone 2 days, but she's never been gone 2 days. She has always come home. And Matt thinks, as a loving younger brother, that something is wrong, that she has not been around for a couple of days. And the cops are going, whatever, she's just, to them, she's just kind of another hippie chick who's out, having a good time. She just graduated from high school, for crying out loud. What do you expect her to do? Except for Darnell. Bridget Darnell listens to Matt's story and learns about his sister. And she thinks, like Matt, that there may be something afoot here. And so she throws in with him against the kind of the will of her colleagues, and puts herself at some risk to help him find her. And I just wanted to write she's one of the good cops. There's a couple of good cops, and there's a couple of kind of nasty cops, and most of them are just kind of in between. But I wanted her to be one of those representative, law enforcers who are cops because they want to help people. And that's really why they do it, And so she's got her chance to do that, but she puts herself at some risk in breaking some of the procedures and some of the, breaking ranks with the other cops.
So
I didn't mean to hijack the whole thing.
No, not at all. I wanted you to do that. It's fascinating. I was thinking, it is a coming of age novel and all, but it's also, there's careless parenting in this book. I mean, mom is checked out into drugs and dad is, gone off, and there's nobody really looking after Matt. He's, as you point out, he's hungry the whole time. And yet, he has to ride his bicycle and do all this stuff. So you worry about him. It's very Dickensian. I mean, I was thinking it reminded me a lot of Oliver Twist.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a update of that Victorian thing where you had kids whose parents or progenitors, whatever you want to call them, were either dead or incarcerated or checked out, and so you have a kid on his own. And I've always thought one of the interesting things about Dickens is that that character really counts. Because you could take, like 2 kids in the same situation, and one of them goes off into, either becomes a criminal or falls apart or die, whatever it is. And then you have the ones that are the survivors. And, it's that whole nature nurture environment, which I think Dickens made you realize that there are people who could triumph due to their personality and whatever, over terrible circumstances.
That's well said. Yeah, I feel some Dickens in here, especially in Matt and his kind of difficult circumstances. Like you're saying, he's always hungry. His house is cold. His mom's kind of a stoner, and she's not really, doing the right thing all the time. And his sister's missing and all that jazz. And so yeah, it was a delight, and it was fun to write about a disadvantaged kid. I mean, Matt's one. Here he's this, white kid living in a privileged community of Laguna Beach, full of, well-to-do people. And yet he considers dumpster diving because he's hungry and he can't put his hands on enough food. By halfway through the novel, 2/3 of the way through the novel, he's essentially homeless. He has nowhere to go. He's living out of his van, his mom's hippie van, which he basically steals from her. And he's a wanted kid. The cops are after him. They suspect him of things, some of which he actually did do. And so there is something Dickensian about the guy, and it reminds me a little bit of that of that family, the young people in Les Miserables, where these relentless, police figures will just haunt them through the decades, and I think that was kind of cool. Matt has a lot of moral dilemmas in this book. He buddies up with the Brotherhood of Eternal Love through an artist who he really respects, the guy who runs the art gallery at this place called Mystic Arts World. Those are real places and people, by the way. And so Matt kind of falls in with these people, and they set him up to do errands and earn a little extra money, sort of off the books kind of thing. And they ask him to do some illegal stuff, and Matt's just a little bit too naive to see through it until he's done it, and now it's too late to take it back. And then Furlong knows, and so Furlong, the cop, tries to co-opt Matt and turn him into an informer, confidential informer, paid informant, and he offers him money, and Matt takes it. So he has a lot of moral things going on with him. There's a scene where he's been asked to steal some things from Mystic Arts World, some evidence, things that might be evidence from this head shop, which is a glorified head shop, really cool place. And as he goes into the back room to load this stuff into his newspaper bag, empty newspaper bag, he stops for a minute and he pulls a Bible off the shelf and asks the Bible to tell him what he should do, if he should steal this stuff and throw in with these people, or if he should not, because thou shalt not steal. That's a very powerful law. And so he pulls the Bible off the shelf, and he opens it just randomly to some passage that doesn't address the problem at all. And then he opens to another place, and it's King David having affairs with Egyptian people and women and stuff, and it's not that. And so he pulls another one. He finally finds this passage. I can't quote it, and I can't remember what it is, but it talks about doing the right thing and stealing and not stealing, and what happens to you if you become a thief. And so that sort of helps him, make his decision. And I'm not going to spoil whether he steals or not, but that scene shows some of his moral dilemma. And I love moral dilemma. I mean, moral dilemmas everywhere, and heroes don't always get to have moral dilemmas because they're always right, but Matt sure does, because he's 16, he's a kid, and he's hungry, and he's been asked to do something bad.
He might have stolen the loaf of bread in Les Mis, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. If he had the opportunity.
It's hard to know how moral you'd be if you're actually starving.
Yeah.
And there's no support system for you. It's
Yeah, the one time in the book that he gets the courage to go to the food pantry where they give you food and poor people food in Laguna, but it's shameful to Matt to do that. He has to do it, but the one time in the book that he does do it, he goes there because he's got no food and no money, and it's closed. So, it's sort of a support system, but Monday through Friday, and then we close at 5, sort of thing. And if you're hungry on Saturday morning, forget it.
And of course, the Beatles went to India, the couple of years before, and a lot of that gurus and meditation centers and all that kind of thing are very much in the counterculture's consciousness, I guess you'd say. Mm-hmm. And can you talk about I forget the exact name of the of the particular guru, Maharaj Om or somebody like
Om
that.
Is his name. Yeah,
and then the Vortex Center. Can you talk about, is that based on a real place in Laguna?
No. There's a Krishna center in Laguna, but there's nothing really quite like the Vortex of Purity. That character and his outfit, the Vortex of Purity, his cult, if you will, is kind of based, not based on any one specific man, but kind of the times, the times of of young people striving and looking for spiritual enlightenment, and plenty of kind of poseurs and often, kind of hokey adults who are, eager to supply that kind of faux spirituality that's so easy to fall for when you're young, and so I was trying to get to the heart of that, and I think also at the same time get to the heart of the idea that even in 1968, as far away as that was, American youth and American pop culture was being swiftly devoured and capitalized by corporate America. And soon one day you were seeing these crazy things like tie-dye, clothing, on Main Beach in Laguna. And 6 months later, it was being advertised for sale at JCPenney. And so I'm trying to get to the idea of youth being corrupted, and the Vortex of Purity is a place where people are told that they can learn these things and these wisdoms and these meditations and do these readings and this special diet that can, if you're lucky and you work hard enough, render you pure. And I like that idea. I like the idea of the gurus, if you will, offering these lofty things, and really what they're doing is something altogether less noble than offering purity to 18-year-olds.
Right. There's that group. What were they? The Brotherhood of the Eternal.
Brotherhood of Eternal Love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting group. Do you know about that? You want me to talk?
I saw a documentary about them, I think.
Say what?
I think I saw a documentary about them.
They were
up in Los Angeles, right?
No, they're Anaheim guys, young guys.
Okay.
The founders, but that's near LA, so you're close. And they just real rapidly and generally speaking, there's 2 or 3 sort of founders, and they were drug people and kind of drunks and mean kids from Anaheim, street fighters, and they came down to they relocated to Laguna, and they went on a terrible drug tear, and one day they drove up, 3 of them I think drove up to Hollywood in order to rob at gunpoint a guy who they were told had thousands of hits of this new thing called LSD, and it was supposed to be a spiritual experience when you take it, and it could open up your mind and change your life for the better forever. And so they went up there, and sure enough, the guy was there. He had the LSD. And he said, they pulled a gun on him. He said, don't shoot me, just take the drugs and give them to your friends and turn on, man. It's the way to go. And so John Griggs was his name, and his buddies brought the dope back to Laguna and did nothing but, had a giant LSD party. They probably ate half of it. And during his gigantic trip, John Griggs saw God and was talked to by Jesus. And Jesus said, spread my gospel and that of the Buddha and all the other truthful writers, and make sure that everybody has love in their hearts and LSD in their pockets. And that became the Brotherhood of Eternal Love's goal. And they founded a church. The Brotherhood of Eternal Love was a church, certified legal church in California, and that was part of their mission statement, was to bring Jesus and LSD to the world. And they weren't hypocrites at all. They believed it and they did it. They used to throw handfuls of LSD tablets out of the windows from the back of one of their convertibles on Coast Highway, and to turn the young people and the hippies and the tourists onto LSD. And one of many crazy things they did. And so those guys, that was a real church, and they ran the church, and that was their motto. And at the same time, what they did to finance LSD giveaways and their church and their building in Laguna was they had an international group of young guys who smuggled hashish, mainly hashish, back from Afghanistan and Lebanon. They would stuff their pants and pockets and surfboards with it and stuff. And they bring it back by the pound, and it would all go out. A lot of it would go out through the Mystic Arts World building on Coast Highway in Laguna, where Matt has a part-time job. And so that was going on, and that was truthful stuff. And they were at one time, people like to say, law enforcement likes to say, At one time in 1968, 1969, the Brotherhood of Eternal Love was the largest international drug smuggling operation in the world. And so that's a high compliment to drug smugglers. Anyway, they're in the book in spades, and I've talked to several of the Brotherhood, the brothers they call them, and they helped me with the book with stories and anecdotes and stuff. And I wanted to capture, you know, I mean, if anything, captures kind of the zany, contradictory, beautiful, idealistic, and yet dangerous, you know, drug-riddled time of 1968. It's the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. Yeah, go online and look them up. They got a great website full of great pictures and good stories and just crazy stuff.
Wow, maybe the documentary I saw was a different kind of a similar group. You know, there was no shortage of those groups, right? In the 70s.
I suppose, yeah.
No, but you know, they go back a really long way. I mean, you can go back to the 20s. Do you remember Ken Culkin wrote a book about M.A. Semple McPherson?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I do.
you know, that was like the 1920s in Los Angeles, and it wasn't drugs, but it was another, you know, religion that you know, hooked people in with various promises. And
yeah,
you know, there's a long history of that. The drugs, you know, kind of came along later, but that's not that different than like the snake-based, you know,
completely
snake
right.
handling religions in Tennessee or something, where the snake venom was supposed to,
yeah,
you know, a lot of religion seems to be about, you know, tripping out in some fashion or other, however you do it.
Yep.
If you look back at the early saints in the Catholic Church, you have to think some of them must surely have been on something.
Yeah, good point. Good point. They're I mean, we Americans have a long, wonderful, you know, history of cultism. I mean, other countries do too.
Yeah.
But if you narrow down the lens a little bit, you know, Southern California really becomes exemplary when it comes to that kind of spiritualist, you know, thinking. And
well, it does, Jeff. But you know, if you read a lot of Scandi noir, Nordic noir, and all, I'm telling you, Sweden is rampant with cults, at least in crime fiction. I don't know that it actually is. I've been there and really loved it, but it seems to be. I mean, you know, there are cults all over. There are British crime novels. There's, you know, it's a thing. But there did seem to be a really brisk business in, you know, in getting people out of cults. I mean, there are a lot of books I can look back on where the basic plot was, you know, to rescue somebody. You'd hire a private eye or whatever it might be to rescue somebody who'd been sucked in by a cult.
Yeah.
You know, Betty Webb wrote one, Patrick, if you remember.
Right.
Laurie King wrote one. I mean, there are a lot of books about cults.
Greg Hurwitz wrote a good one about pulling out a kidnapped, you know, person out of a cult. It was a harrowing book. I forget what it was called, but Hurwitz is a really good writer, so he pulled it off. It was nice. Yeah.
I mean, there were people who seemed to have expertise in, you know, penetrating cults and springing kids or however it was and deprogramming them.
Yeah.
And you know, I've never understood the dynamic behind like Jim Jones and that cult. I mean, I've never figured out why people would voluntarily A, emigrate, and then B, you know, drink the Kool-Aid. But obviously it's incredibly powerful, whatever hold, you know, this thing has on them.
Yeah. Well, you know, in 1,000 Steps, there becomes a very real possibility that Matt's missing sister has fallen in with this group.
Right.
Or something like that, and Matt himself, through the charismatic leader of the Vortex of Purity, is very impressed by this man. He's spiritual. He's always hungry, just like Matt is, and he shares food. When Matt goes up to the Vortex, it's always you know, feast tonight, and the Mahajadon makes sure that Matt gets not one or two, but, you know, 3 heaping paper plates full of, you know, noodles and vegetables and all this really good food that they have. And he treats Matt with respect and helps Matt in his beginning of his search for his missing sister. And so you see through the, you know, Matt sees the charisma, and he partially falls for it. And I wanted to make sure that the Mahajad Om possessed the same kind of spiritual magnetism that he thinks he does, and he does. He's got it, and Matt falls for it. And I think that's kind of one of the cool parts of the book. Other people don't really believe in Mahajad at all, but Matt's sympathetic.
He's vulnerable too. You know, he's really vulnerable. I'm not going to say what goes on, but I really liked his older brother. And all the way through the book, I was anxious about his older brother. So I'm glad you put his story in there. I don't want to talk about how it comes out, but I
Okay.
was prepared to come over there and beat you over the head.
Yeah. Yeah. I had to do that, Barbara. And I mean, not just because it was 1968, but because I had friends who were just a little older than me. I mean, say 5 years older. Mike D, one of my very best friends in high school, he went to Vietnam at 19. They drafted him, or at 18, and he was gone from my life. He lived. He was fine. He passed away of natural causes just a few years ago. Great guy. And so if you're going to write something about 68 really in America, you just gotta touch on that war. You absolutely have to, the whole idea of the older brother Kyle becoming short, as they like to say, as you mentioned, he's a short timer. When the book opens, he's got whatever it is, 44 days left, in his tour of duty, and he's coming home if he lives. But he's very frightened that he's like a lot of guys. The legend goes that the shorter your time, the better your chances of getting shot are. And so that's kind of a background drama that I play with, and I wanted to get that war in there, and the protesters and everything. I mean, I can remember. I'm sure you do. The sight of those coffins and body bags being loaded off the Maryland Air Force Base or wherever it was, probably more than one. And then those were our American neighbors, my friends, coming home. And so you got to write about that. That's a big part. It's a big part of this story, even though it's in the background.
And Kyle's you make him a tunnel rat, which adds another layer to it. Through these letters that he writes home, you get a glimpse into what he's dealing with over there.
Yeah, that's fantastic stuff. I've read a few books about the tunnel rats. They've been written about a lot, and fantastic, scary, jobs that they had. And for anyone with even a trace of claustrophobia, which I have a little more than a trace.
Well, let me tell you, gentlemen, having been there as a tourist, they now take you as a tourist visit to see them.
Oh, they do?
They do. Really? They take you to see the killing fields in Cambodia, which I passed on because I didn't want to do that, the Khmer Rouge fields. But you can tour the tunnels, some of the still remaining complexes, and you can go and see them.
Yeah, I don't know if I could do that, but I'm glad that it's still visible.
The tunnels of, what is it? Tunnels of Cu Chi?
Something like that.
Yeah, I remember reading that. That's a great book.
It is a great book. It's a scary book. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's something kind of almost like elemental in that. I don't know if that's the right word, but going down into the earth,
Yeah.
The Vietnamese in general are small, and so it was they had a tactical advantage in the sense that they're small, and they could do that in a way that larger Americans really couldn't. I've been to the War Museum in Hanoi, and the most irritating thing about it is that for the Vietnamese, it's just a little tiny section of their war museum, because their enemy for forever is China, and they just call it the American War and give it almost no play at all. And when you think about how it divided our country and was so much a part of the upheaval in the late 60s, and you recognize that to them it really didn't mean much.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So my first husband was sent to Vietnam in 1962. So it was a long story. Anyway, not a happy war for me, and that's probably why I didn't pay any attention, or tried not to pay any attention to it, blocked it out until it was over. But it's an interesting perspective. Anyway, I'm glad you put it in the story, because as you say, no story of 1968 could possibly be complete without writing about it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So what are you working on now, kiddo?
What am I working on now, Barbara? I'm working on a dog thriller.
A dog? Yay!
A dog thriller.
You have a new puppy?
Yeah, and he partially inspired this story. And I've been working on it for a long time, a year. And basically, it's a story about a young American reporter who rescues a wounded dog from a Tijuana animal sanctuary rescue clinic.
Yeah.
And as a hardworking reporter, she wants to know more about his life on the Mexican streets. He's a Mexican street dog. And the more she finds out, the less he is a Mexican street dog and something actually very different. So no working title yet. I've written the draft. I'll get back to it when, next week or so. Took the holidays off. So anyway, a dog thriller. It's about a woman and a dog.
Wonderful. Well, we're all dog lovers here at the pen. We have two that work in the store. Patrick has had dogs. I'm now surrounded by two puppies and an older dog. And
what's funny? What's funny, Jeff? I mean, it's worth mentioning. Our greyhound that passed away a couple of years ago.
Oh.
We had a greyhound who, best dog in the world, but she was a retired racer and she raced in Tijuana.
Oh, wow.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We didn't know
Wow.
that.
Yeah, and she had all these little wounds, like her ear and tongue was split,
Oh.
all these battle scars.
Wow. I love greyhounds. You had a
man.
greyhound. I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, they're the best.
Wow. That's really,
I don't know.
really
I'm going to put up a flag for my Cavapoos. Don't you dare say
Yeah,
it.
they're
Yeah.
wonderful dogs too.
We
yeah.
have a rescue dog too. That's a Shiba Inu and Terrier mix, and she's fabulous. She looks like a fox. She has a pointed nose, and she's that gorgeous color that a fox, and she has
Yeah.
this big plumy tail. And
That's
the
neat.
little Cavapoos tails are these long, skinny things. And then
Oh,
here's
yeah,
Nala
yeah,
with this
yeah.
fabulous tail, and you see them all out in the backyard. It's hilarious with the tails all moving around.
Yeah. That's
So
just,
dog, yay,
that's
you must
really-
come. You must come and bring the dog.
Yeah, well, that's a real possibility. Rita wants to do that. She wants to take road trips with the dog, and I do too. So we may.
We do, and you know what? We've done dog book events like David Rosenfeld, who writes wonderful books about dog, and we actually have the local rescue. One of the local rescue groups comes to the event, and we raise money for it.
Oh, how cool!
Yeah,
Oh,
you
cool.
can auction off a character name or other things, so you can actually do some serious good for
Yeah,
animals by
yeah.
coming. So that shall inspire you.
Yeah, that'd be neat. We got this dog that inspired this story is a Mexican rescue dog that we got locally here in Fallbrook, and we actually got when we got him, he was 6 months old. We got video of the rescue person picking him up off this gravel side of this gravel street in
Wow.
Tijuana, and this little trembling dog was cute little thing, but he was skinny and he was trembling and he had ticks around his eyes and he was in terrible shape, and they had to get him right to the vet, and it took them some weeks, but they got rid of his diseases, and they cleaned him up, and they put a little weight back on him and stuff. And so when we intercepted him at the Fallbrook Animal Shelter, he was 6 months old, having lived in the streets, probably been born in the streets of Tijuana, and he was just literally terrified of everything. He was terrified of us, cars, other dogs, noises, you name it. He was the most afraid dog you can imagine. And we just threw him right into life. We started taking him to the dog park and, taking him out on walks and taking him on all our errands and stuff, and now he's almost normal.
I'll tell you an interesting thing. My daughter also is a dog lover, and she has a rescue dog, and then she has a dog that they bought from a breeder. We've had two rescue dogs and two dogs that came, three dogs actually, because the last pair are littermates from breeders. And one way you can really tell the difference is the dogs that you bought from a good home, the breeders and all, they lie on their back, they sleep on their back. They're happy to have their tummies rubbed, they're just, the rescue dogs don't do that. The rescue dogs sleep on their stomach, they shy away from strangers and all, and they
Yeah.
never really get over that.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to watch the three of them and how different they are, because one is a
interesting.
rescue and two are not. I don't
That's
know,
very
Patrick, did
interesting.
your greyhound behave like that?
No, she was just such a gentle giant. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, she's just a couch potato.
Oh,
And then,
you never scratched her tummy?
oh yeah, no, we we would take her to the dog park, and she would just socialize and go around and meet everybody.
But what
then
I'm
when
referring to is that lying around the house, the dogs.
oh no, absolutely. She would do these like elaborate like Kundalini poses and
Yeah.
stuff. We have some great
Yeah.
pictures.
It really,
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. Well, we'll really enjoy that. Jeff, why don't we see if we have any questions from viewers, Patrick?
Yeah, I was just kind of taking a look. Let's see here. Okay, Dan asked this question earlier. He said, is it difficult to write about a time without referencing the technology we have today?
No, you get to ditch it all, which is kind of nice. There's no tech in this book, and as there wasn't then really. And so it's kind of nice to it's kind of nice to metaphorically put the smartphone down for enough time to write this book that contains nothing about smartphones. I found it to be kind of refreshing and really kind of quaint. When Matt, the hero, has to get into a really hot phone booth and dig through his pockets for the last dime to make a call. Scenes that we wouldn't have anymore. So no, it was easy to just drop all that stuff and imagine the past as it was. And like I said earlier, I got to live through that time. I was a cognizant adolescent in 1968, so I have memories of all that, and it was fun to write about.
Was it fun also to kind of get back into the language of the day?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's everything's like real heavy, man, and everything's a bad trip, and bummer, all those kind of words.
RF. We used to say that all the time. I didn't even know what it really meant.
What was the word? What was the word, Barbara?
RF. I'm not spelling it out, but that used to be a Stanford phrase that I remember. I was so dumb I didn't even realize what it meant.
It's good. Yeah, I love the language. I tried to get enough of it in to be funny and spicy and give the people a feel for it without overcooling it, and I worry about too many bitchins, but
right.
Yeah,
that was the other one.
Bitchin's a California word though, isn't it?
Bitchin' RF was actually the entire phrase that people used for almost anything. Oh Lord.
Yeah.
I still remember how appalled my parents were when I came home with it. Look, I'd say bitchin' RF. My father would go, what?
Yeah, my parents weren't exactly thrilled by my language at that time.
No.
Oh yeah, our good friend Steve Schwartz. He just says, he spent many days at the setting of the new novel. It's a terrific read. Thanks, Mr. Parker. And he also asks, do you ever go back to eat at Las Brisas? Nothing like drinks on the patio.
Yeah. Hi, Stephen. Yeah, you bet I do. It's been a little while, but it's still a great restaurant, and it's still Las Brisas, same place, the prime real estate of Laguna. So yeah, I'll go back there. I'll go back there again. It's really kind of neat how, in a lot of ways, how little Laguna has changed since 1968. I mean, a lot of change, but the big stuff, the fundamentals of what kind of a town it is, and physically, especially, are still there. So you can, it's still kind of an unspoiled little town.
There's a question from one of our YouTube viewers. He or she, I'm not sure which, says, I really enjoyed the Charlie Hood and Mercy Rayborn books. Here. I love those Mercy books, especially. She goes, I don't know if I've read them all. Any plans to revisit either character?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I'd have done that by now for Mercy, and for the other one was was it Charlie? Yeah. No, I think I would have scrambled back there by now, because I like both of those series a lot, and I had fun writing them. And but I felt that Mercy and Charlie Hood, I thought that their stories were sealed and told, and were gratifying. I didn't feel like another volume needed to be written about either of those, and that's the main reason why I stayed away. So no plans, but thanks for reading, and thanks for the nice compliment.
Yeah, we'd asked, I think, I'm not sure, before we got started here, about Roland Ford, and Barbara and I both love those books, and they're such terrific classic California novels, PI novels about a part of California that is underrepresented maybe in fiction, which is San Diego and environs. Any plans to, we're hoping for, you've done 4 so far, right?
Yeah, I've done 4. I may revisit Roland Ford.
Roland.
I like his voice, and I like his morals. I like his job because it brings him into contact with the world. He lives in the little town where I live in Fallbrook, North San Diego County, and so he's kind of to himself in a lot of ways. He lives in this old kind of crumbling hacienda. Yeah, but his job, if you will, the people that he meets on his investigations represent the world at large, and they kind of come to Roland's doorstep, if you will, and he experiences the world that way. And that's a really neat setup for a writer. PI is a great protagonist just by virtue of their profession. And so I may want to do another Roland Ford at some point. I like the way that Roland kind of is able to tackle the subjects of the day. As an old newspaper reporter, I value good reportage, and I like the idea that fiction can touch upon topical things and illuminate the moment in history that you're living through and that you're writing about. And so I may want to dust him off again, but I got to write this dog thriller first. I'm totally devoted to the dog story at this point.
That's great. I love the community that Roland has at his hacienda. The kind of cast of characters that lives in that little community.
Yeah, the irregulars. Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
Exactly. Well, let's see.
Yes, Jeff. We don't think his story is yet done.
Okay, you said that earlier, and I respect that judgment, and I'll
I agree with you about Mercy and Charlie. I loved Mercy. I really did. And I was sad to see her, but I think you'd said what you wanted to say about both of those characters.
Yeah.
And California Girl, we see the poster behind you on the wall. Another favorite of a lot of ours as well.
Yeah, mine too. I'm fond of that.
It is, but Silent Joe is my book. That I think in many ways, Jeff, is your very best book.
Well, you've said that before, and
I'm not alone in saying that. Let me tell you, and that is the book that when it was done, it was done.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even consider doing another one of those.
I think it would be very hard to have written a second book about Joe, although there were real possibilities. But it's just a brilliant book. It really, I don't know, I've never been a boy, so I don't know what it would. There don't seem to me to be as many books about girls becoming women as there are about boys coming of age to be men. I don't know if it's a gender thing or what it is, but I think the only way I can imagine what it would be like is to read your books.
Yeah. I wouldn't try a coming of age story about a girl. I don't think. I think sometimes there's a stories that kind of aren't yours to tell, and so for me that would probably be one of them.
Yeah.
And but I've read some, and they're wonderful. I wish I could. That big bestseller a couple of years ago, where the Crawdads Sing, was just a gorgeous coming of age story of Kaya. It was just unbelievably good. Yeah. So yeah, I'll let her tell that story, and I'll tell the story of Matt Anthony in 1,000 Steps.
Well, you did a brilliant job. So thank you very much for signing our books.
Yeah.
And, I urge any of you who are watching this, grab one, tell your friends. This is a great book. You could really give this to young adults. It's an adult novel, but I think it'd be a wonderful book, frankly, to give to a teenager.
Thank you.
And may give them insights or comfort or whatever it might be in their own struggles as they go along, and recognize that what they're going through, other people have also had to endure and survive. Anyway, it's a joy to talk to you as always, my dear. Thank you so very much. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year, Patrick, Barbara. Great to see you. Next time.
Thank you all for joining us this evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.